You know, at the very heart of any free society, there's this simple but really powerful idea. Power has to be divided. Today, we're diving into the separation of powers, the democratic blueprint that was basically designed to keep ambition in check and protect our liberty from the grip of any single ruler.
Yeah, this famous warning from Lord Acton, it just gets right to the point, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the problem that the separation of powers was built to solve. How do you create a government that's strong enough to actually govern, but not so strong that it ends up crushing the very people it's supposed to serve?
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the core idea of the three branches. Then we'll get to know the brilliant thinker behind it all, Montesquieu, and check out his system of checks and balances. After that, we'll weigh the pros and cons, and finally, we'll see how this whole doctrine actually plays out in the real world.
Okay, so let's get right to it. At its core, what does separation of powers really even mean? Let's break down the fundamental principle.
Think of it like this. You're dividing up all the work of government into three totally distinct jobs. You've got one group that writes the laws, another group that puts those laws into action, and a third group that acts as the referee. And the absolutely crucial part is that these three jobs are handed over to three separate, independent groups. This visual really helps, right? You can see the three pillars. First, there's the legislature, or parliament, the folks who craft the laws. Then you have the executive, that's the government of the day, and their job is to implement those laws. And finally, the judiciary interprets the law, making sure it's all applied fairly. Three distinct powers, all working together to support one stable government.
Now, an idea this big doesn't just pop out of nowhere. It was forged in an age of absolute kings and a real hunger for freedom. To get it, we need to travel back to 18th century France and meet the man who designed the whole thing.
So this was the era of the Sun King, Louis XIV. He famously declared, "L'état c'est moi," I am the state. I mean, think about that. All the power, making laws, enforcing them, judging them, it all rested in his hands. That was the very definition of tyranny, and that was the problem Montesquieu set out to solve.
And here he is, the man with the solution, Charles de Montesquieu. His insight here was absolutely revolutionary. See, after he visited England and saw a system that protected liberty, he argued that combining legislative and executive power in one person or group will always lead to tyranny. And that became the central idea in his masterpiece, The Spirit of Laws.
You can see the direct line here, can't you? Montesquieu was writing right after this age of absolute monarchy. His book, which came out in 1748, was a direct challenge to that whole system. And its impact? It was explosive. Just a few decades later, his ideas became a cornerstone of the French Revolution.
Okay, so separating the powers is a great start. But you might be wondering, what's to stop one branch from just getting greedy and grabbing more power for itself? Well, Montesquieu's answer was this truly elegant and powerful mechanism. The key is right here in this French maxim. Le pouvoir arrête le pouvoir. Power halts power. The genius here isn't just about separating the branches, it's about arming each branch with the ability to limit or check the others. It creates this constant tension, a natural balance where, basically, ambition is forced to counteract ambition.
This chart of the U.S. system shows it perfectly. It's this intricate dance. For example, Congress can pass a law, right? But the president can veto it. But wait, this story doesn't end there. Congress can then override that veto if they get a big enough majority. Every single power is met with a counterpower. It's all designed to force compromise and stop any one branch from becoming too dominant.
And let me tell you, this idea spread like wildfire. Montesquieu's book became the essential blueprint for new democracies all over the world. It was a cornerstone of the French Declaration of Rights, and it was the foundational design for the United States Constitution. As one of the American founders, James Madison, put it, letting all these powers merge into the same hands is the very definition of tyranny.
But let's be real for a second. Is this doctrine a silver bullet? I mean, in theory, it sounds absolutely perfect. But when these big ideas about government meet the messy reality of politics, well, there are always trade-offs. So let's take a clear-eyed look.
The upsides are huge, right? It protects your liberty, it ensures courts are independent, and it promotes the rule of law. But the downsides are just as real. All that tension can lead to government gridlock, making it really hard to get things done. And what's interesting is that sometimes that's a feature, not a bug. It forces compromise. But in the real world, the separation is never perfect. These branches aren't in watertight compartments. It's a constant, messy balancing act.
And what's really crucial to understand is that this doctrine isn't some rigid, one-size-fits-all formula. Different countries have taken Montesquieu's core idea and adapted it to their own unique histories and politics. Let's see how it actually plays out on the world stage.
This table gives us a great snapshot. So you have the US with a really strong, rigid separation built into its presidential system. The UK, on the other hand, has a much looser, more flexible separation, where the executive branch is actually drawn from the legislature. And then you have a place like India, which uses a kind of hybrid model, balancing judicial independence with a lot of overlap between the other two. Each approach just shows how flexible this core principle can be.
And that brings us to the fundamental trade-off, the big question at the heart of this whole doctrine. In our fast-paced modern world, a world that often demands quick, decisive action, is a system built on checks and balances a source of stability, or is it just an engine for frustrating gridlock? That's the question every modern democracy is still trying to figure out.